Well, hello, everybody. This is John Manna. I am part of the ServiceNow Solutions team here at CDW. Thanks for joining us today for this educational workshop. It's part of a larger series. Let me share a little bit with you about that series right now before I introduce our speaker for the day. So this is part of a free monthly educational workshop. Some of you have been to many of ours. We've been doing them for years now. They're all posted up on YouTube under CDW ServiceNow Solutions page. Today we're going to be talking about ServiceNow's approach to managing SaaS, and it's part of software asset management, of course. So excited to have you all here. There's another thing I'd love to share with you a little bit today as well. And there's one more thing I'd like to share before I turn the mic over to Doc. And I talked a little bit about knowledge. We are going to be in Knowledge in full force. CDW will have about 60 people at this Knowledge event, all different roles of our organization, and we've got a ton going on. I'll share real briefly a little bit about that, but the bottom right corner, if you want to grab that or capture that with your phone, it will get you to a landing page that lets you see the free workshops we're doing, the ways you can set up one-on-one meetings with guys like Doc Burnham and others, right? We'll set up, we've got our own section of a restaurant there at Knowledge that is set for us pretty much the whole time. So we can set up a breakfast, lunch, a lunch and learn, anything that you'd like. We've got a customer appreciation event we'd love to invite you to. And also, we've got a number of specific sessions, including an AI readiness session. So that little QR code, that's there for you. Please feel free to take a capture of that. I'll have it at the end of the deck as well. And we'd love to meet you if you're going to be there. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Doc Burnham, and I'll say this. Doc's going to introduce himself, give you a little bit of his background, but I also want to say we're just excited that Doc's been part of our team for a number of years now. Doc's got a storied, past in history, not only with ServiceNow, but in the topic area of today. And Doc used to be at ServiceNow, for example. He was over there for about 6 years, and part of what he did there, he was their ITAM governance leader, and now he's here with us at CDW. So Doc, looking forward to today's session. I will turn the mic over to you.
Okay, thank you. And John, go ahead and you can monitor the other side of the Q&A, and if people are raising hands.
Will do.
Okay, today's topic is going to view an overview of what SaaS does and how ServiceNow supports it. So what data, what reports, how do we optimize it, and some actions that you need to do. And like I said, this slide here basically tells you I'm old and I've been around for a long time. It just says, been doing it for 30 plus years, worked at ServiceNow. I've worked with a lot of organizations to put in their asset management program. Hardware, software, all of it. SaaS is a big environment change for a lot of customers, especially since COVID. So we're working with that. Now, one of the easy parts is, what is SaaS? It's software as a service. But we also hear a lot of confusion of what SaaS actually is. So when we look at that, so we're going through, here are some topics with it. SaaS utilizes the internet to application, direct delivery of applications out there by different vendors. True. It's also a licensing model that's out there. How do you buy cloud-based applications? And how do you access them? Supposed to eliminate on-prem. It doesn't necessarily, especially on some of them, like Microsoft or Adobe especially. You end up bringing software on-prem on your devices, and you can also access it through the cloud. So we do it. Now, when we're looking at this is, how do we access SaaS? SaaS, software as a service, it's both a software licensing and a delivery methodology out there, because you can license it by SaaS. You can also deliver it. There's different interactions depending on the vendor that you're using. So we have to take that into account when we look at it. And there's no perfect tool to do everything because, as you know, licensing changes by the day on certain ones. So when we're trying to manage this, like it says, how do you manage and optimize not only the purchase, but the consumption and the retirement of SaaS related software or applications. And there's a difference between software and applications. Most times we talk about them in the same vein, though. So then, interesting facts that come up here within here, because SaaS is not new to the organizations out there. It has just got a lot more prevalent out there, like it said, but it also causes a lot more problems out there. We have got IT professionals that say report that employees store a lot of company data in the cloud. They're unsanctioned clouds. So then the question is, who owns that data? And also, how do we get access to them if they're offboarded? We have a lot of business units who don't want to wait for IT to give them certain things. So they'll go around IT for shadow IT, and they'll create, methodology. So they'll get their own SaaS application out there and do the work on it. Whether it's an Adobe, whether it's Autodesk, whether it's Microsoft, they'll go around and do it without IT knowing about it. So then again, what is owned out there? There's other tools that they come in that IT doesn't know about, or the organization doesn't know about it, whether it's supported by IT or not. Now, the big one I always laughed at is like an average enterprise company has over 900 unknown cloud services. That's a lot. And I did some background checking on this and everything else, and it's very common that there are well over 1,000 applications out there for cloud services, whether it's Box, Dropbox, any of these other things that they're using for other cloud services that IT doesn't know, let alone support for this. And again, it comes into, it's a problem. Yes. How do we solve that problem? As much as we'd love to have that easy button out there, it's not going to happen on everything. So we're going to have to figure out how we're going to do it. So within the ServiceNow environment, we do different things. So as we're going through this, we're looking at it here, and it says, remember, SaaS license management, it's to manage and optimize not only the purchase, the consumption, but also the retirement of these. So what we're trying to make sure is, do we know what SaaS items do we own? Because we lack visibility, especially when customers in the customer environment, they go around their IT department. So then IT doesn't know about it. Procurement should know about it, but they may not know that it's licensing by contracts or anything else because it got put on a P card or some other way to pay for it. So we need to know from an organization level, what SaaS do we own? Are we buying what we actually need? And are we using what we actually have? Because if we need something, we're buying it. Why are we buying this stuff? Whether it's in process or outside of process. And if we have this, which is real common, especially like for Microsoft, Office 365, are you using what you actually have? Because if someone leaves the company, if they're off-boarded for any reason, retirement, anything, did we recover those licenses that they used for SaaS? We don't know. How do we know if we're using what we actually have or not? Now, detecting and optimizing SaaS is always a challenge in different places. So getting it together in a single platform makes it a lot easier. That's what we're doing with the ServiceNow side here. They're giving us a lot of data from various sources, and you'll see some of them coming up here, so we can understand what's out there. So we get that visibility. So we can see what SaaS applications are being used within the organization, whether it's controlled by IT or whether it's outside of IT's control. So that way we can see it. And not only, how do we access it? So again, if we lose access, what happens to that data? How do we get that data back? So there's a lot of things that ServiceNow is already taking care of, because how do we get into it from SSO? How do we know what applications or software is out there so we can bring that data in automatically? So that way we can see that with minimal effort. And of course, how do we identify what we own and what we are using? Because how do we reclaim things? Those are stale licenses, so we can recover that cost. That's a big value, and you can get direct input from it and results right away. And then, are we using what we have? Did we buy 1,000 licenses and we only need 600? So how well do we do it? And what are we actually using? Just because we give it to somebody doesn't mean they're actually using it. So how do we look to see they're using those licenses? Because if they're not, how do we bring them back in so we can redeploy those? And like I said, there's a lot of tools that are out there that we use for this. We also have the ones, remember, the main thing about SaaS licenses, we're supposed to be able to access it through the internet. So it's not usually installed on our laptops or desktops. But there are those hybrid ones like Microsoft, Adobe, there's other ones, Autodesk, depending on the licensing. But we will see parts of those installed on our desktops, and parts of them are not. But are they the same license? Or did we buy you a license for a desktop and we give you access to the cloud? So those are the things that we need to find out to make sure they're in sync also. Now, here's a typical slide, and you've seen it from the ServiceNow, so I use their slide on it because they did a good job. It's the quickest path to the value of SAM, Software Asset Management, because we want to know what we have out there and how do we save it as fast as we can. So first ones they always go about is reducing known SaaS spend. Lots of SaaS products out there. So again, what do we own? What are we using? And are we using what we own? So we're looking at this. These are integrations that come in that are already set up out there for direct integration so we can bring this data in. They've already done the hard work, so now we just have to do the integrations. Of course, you have to put in your authentication to get the information, but then the data comes in. Then we can start to do the analysis. The second part is detecting unknown software spend and obviously optimizing things. So this is where we turn around and say, this is what IT knows about. What does IT not know about? So that's the spend analysis. We're spending money, so we're looking at the financial data from the procurement side. They're buying a lot of licenses or a lot of money going to Adobe or Microsoft. Are those going for a cloud service? They could be. That's what we want to know. If they're buying, Adobe Cloud through a different way, we're going to capture those. So we can turn around and see where they're spending their money, what's the cost, who's using it, that type of setup. And then we turn around, we're capturing unknown spend. So IT can look at that and say, if we're spending this money, how do we get better control of it? Because we're always worrying about compliance, not necessarily just dollar spend, but are we compliant with it? Because if we're not compliant or we're using the wrong types of licenses, that can cause the organization a lot of issues. Now, the other one is optimizing all of the spend and audit risk. This kind of goes hand in hand with, finding out what we own out there so we can reduce the spend, finding unknown, now optimizing it, and how do we support a risk? Because if we're using it improperly, and one of the biggest ones that we're running into today is someone will buy a SaaS license. It's a personal license. It's not a business license. So the copyright on it says that you can't use that license for business use. So all that data that you created now is in jeopardy. The other part of that is if it's an individual license, who owns that data? You paid for it from the company card. You're doing company work on it, but that license is actually in an individual's name. It's not in the organization's name. So how do they get that data coming back? So that's what we're looking at for that, is part of this quick value. And a lot of things that we deal in SAM from a value perspective, we may cost us more money up front because we didn't know these licenses were out there. So we have to bring them back in. But if the company's already paying for them, you're not bringing a lot of extra money in, but we may have to shift that money to where it goes to and which classification, so we know total spend, and then how do we optimize it? And then we can worry about reclaiming it, doing audits, all of those aspects. Now, when we go in, the next side of it goes, how do we do these integrations? This is part of knowing what is already out there and how do we control what's already out there. Those are those direct integrations. So we can look at those. There's thousands of applications running around out there, as we know. So as an asset manager, I want to know what software is out there. How do I get that data coming in? So that's what I'm looking for on this. I've got direct integrations, so I can link right out there. Remember, ServiceNow's already done a bunch of these for you. So these are the common ones that they've already done and did the hard work. Now you do the authentication, log on to it with the integration, the data will come over into ServiceNow. So that way we can see all the information from these key SaaS products out here for it, whether it's single sign-on or not. There's also custom integrations that we go. If there's not one out there that's already available on the store out there, and they continuously bring these out all the time, and they're not specifically linked to a release. So if you go out there and you see a new one, they just released a couple of them in the last month here that we were using on a different project I was on. But if there's one out there or some that you don't have access to, you can create your own connection, whether it's low code, no code, that type. So you can leverage the functionality inside of ServiceNow to get out there, especially if there's APIs that are out there already offered, by that SaaS product. You can bring those in easier. But that way we can connect to it. And then if you don't want to wait for ServiceNow to get around to building that out there for you, you can connect it on your own. And it's a lot faster. But we want to make sure that we can capture all the data. The other thing on these, and we'll see it on other ones, when you connect to their portals out there, there's a lot of data on that portal that comes into ServiceNow. There's also different aspects, especially usage data. You may not be able to bring in all the usage data because some of these SaaS applications don't allow you to pull the usage data. You have to request it from them. So you may end up requesting usage data from them versus it automatically being available to you on the portal. So that's one of those things because we like to look at usage data, see who's using what and when. Now, this is one of the dashboards that's in there. It's just the overview dashboard for the SaaS. Again, it's going to tell you a lot of information, what your current spend is, unused subscriptions, potential savings, of course. It's a snapshot of what's going out there. We see stale subscriptions out there all the time. We forgot about some and no one's using them. So how do we recover those? But it's going to give you that type of data already. It collects it, and using the analysis, it's putting it up on, the dashboard for you. Now, we can adjust the dashboards around, as you know, inside of it to get more data in there. But you can get a host of reports from it. And this is always real handy. So that way you can say which area is paying for which type of software. And then you can look at why has one area got different software than the other one, especially SaaS software from it. And can we combine these or put them together? Because you may end up with multiple subscriptions or portals out there for the same software. And if they were joined together, you would get a better overall cost. So that's part of looking at this out there to see everything that's there. But these are out of the box dashboards that come up. Again, there's other functions you can add out there for it to get different reports. Now, some of the options that we run into, because we're dealing with SaaS, one of them, this is how we figure out what we don't know out there. Finding that unknown software spend. That's the spend detection side. When you put it out there, you have to activate it to make sure the spend detection's there. It also has to be connected and configured so it's bringing in those financial transactions. Otherwise, it doesn't know where to get the data from. But that's where it's going to go through and say, look, we're spending a lot of money at Adobe. Are those Adobe licenses, or we just like a lot of t-shirts that year? Those type of things. But it also tells us which business units are spending the money or users for going out there. And remember that thing? It's a business license versus a personal license. Because if we're spending money, if it's going out there, just because we paid for it from the company card doesn't mean it's a business license. It's going to default to the personal license. And there's rules and regulations for the copyright. Can you use that to do your business work? In most cases, you can't. So then it puts into jeopardy the work that you're doing. The other ones that we're looking at for here is the mouse won't work here. Is the next step here on it is SAS Detection. How do we know what we're using out there? This is so we can understand our environment more too. We've got spend detection, but what are we using for SAS? It's basically tracking the URLs. We work with security, we work with other things. If we're constantly going out to a specific URL, it may be the SAS applications. And there's a list of different SAS applications and URLs for those. That's part of the SAS detection that ServiceNow uses too. But it can identify that URL goes to Adobe, or it goes to Salesforce, or any one of the host of these. Again, why is it going there if you didn't know about it? Is it an authorized application? Or in some cases, can you even go to that URL? Should you? Then it comes back to who's using it. Who's the users? Who's the business unit? What's the location? So that's part of knowing what you don't know. This is how we find it out. Spend detection and SAS detection. So that way we can get it. Now, the other part here for some of the examples, and there's a lot of them. These are just some of them. Well, we turn around and you can read the screen too. It just turns around. Who are the users that are doing this? And are they actually using that software? Whether it's, are they accessing, GoToMeeting or Slack, or they just have it open? Because just because we assign it to them doesn't mean that they're using it. So that's what we're looking at, how we can bring that data in, because then if they're not using it, do they really need it? So that way we can recover those licenses. That comes back to, are we using what we already have? Now, some of the nice things with this one is there's a group of these that you can also take additional action. And you can see it, I highlighted them in yellow on this. When was the last time they logged in? What's the date that they did? What did they do? And if you want, you can automate their reclamation to recover those licenses and the workflow. Now, some of these are just recovering, the license is one thing. Other ones actually recover and protect the data that's out there. Because if they're using this, they may have additional data out there for it, especially on like Box. You're turning around out there and you put a lot of files. As part of that workflow, it's going to preserve those files before it reclaims the license. That way you don't lose that data. That's especially handy if you're big projects and you roll off one project to another one. What happens to those files? Because you're going to need those. You can see it on G Suite. There's a lot of them that deal with files because the data is important. I can give you lots of horror stories that says person left the company for whatever reason and they shut off their access. They were using personal accounts, or they just pulled them off a license and lost all the data. So now they have to go redo that data. So you need to look at that before you just recover a license. Are there data? If so, how do you reclaim that data to make sure you've got it under your control? Okay. Now, some of the most things that we're doing from an overview perspective. ServiceNow goes out there and it tells you how to manage and optimize. It gives you those tools. It identifies the subscribers by product, by individuals, all of those aspects of it. It also can identify inside of ServiceNow, is this user still assigned? Are they an active user? Were they offboarded? Were there no usage? That way we can reclaim those licenses. We also find undocumented spend. Remember, spend detection, we're looking at it, or SAS, detection, so we can look at it. Reclaiming licenses. How do we optimize the spend? Again, when we optimize, do we know what SAS do we own? We need to answer that. Are we buying what we need? And are we using what we actually own? One of the other aspects that comes in, are we identifying redundant capabilities? Multiple applications that do the same thing, or multiple portals or subscriptions to the same software that shouldn't be separated. They should be under one setup of it. And then we always want our easy button, right? There is no easy button per se. It's all about processes. What is your process? How are you going to do this? And as part of this, we need to make sure you got the right processes. The tool is there, but the tool will only do what you tell it to do in most cases. So we need to make sure we got an integration into that application so we can get it in. You need authentication so we can pull that data in. You can add those entitlements from those SAS into your entitlements table for software asset management. That way you can manage them better also. You can allocate those licenses. You can do other actions. Create as much workflow as you can to automate where it makes sense. Adding new subscribers, removing old subscribers. Don't forget about the data though, of course. And then one of the big things, when you find issues, how are you going to fix them? Especially if you've got personal subscriptions, turning around and bringing those over into the business or commercial licenses that you already have. That's what we're looking for. So ServiceNow gives us that capability. Problem is, we have to make sure we've got the processes and understand how we can use that data. Okay, that's what I've got for this. I know we got a bunch of questions here coming in. That's what I was looking for.
Sure. And Doc, appreciate that. And I'll kind of throw out a couple of those questions right now for you. We've got really two groups here that we're talking to. Some of these folks have SAM already, and I guess the question is, what are first steps for them to start moving more in this direction and really maximize their ability to manage SaaS? If they've already got SAM in place, what do you recommend as next steps? What should they be looking to do?
Okay, if they've got SAM in place, depending on if they're using SAM Pro, they already have this. This is another functionality of it. It can be activated, and you have to make sure you activate this. So just because you're doing typical software license management, doesn't mean you're doing SaaS. So turn on the SaaS side of it, so that way we can get the SaaS side of it to get the integrations. It also means that you don't have to do all of the license management side of it for your regular licenses. You can go right into SaaS from that perspective. So what are your key ones? Get the direct integrations. It will start bringing data in. But remember, this is part of the SAM Pro model there for it already. So your next step is make sure that they've activated the SaaS items. There's different plugins that just have to be activated and then configured, like spend analysis has to be configured. Direct integrations have to be done to bring in those particular, each of the different vendors.
Great. Yeah, that makes sense. And how about the folks that don't have SAM yet? Either they don't own it yet or they haven't implemented it. Maybe you can share a little bit what your experience is in implementing net new for a customer, SAM. How long does that project typically run? And do you normally recommend a crawl, walk, run? And if so, what does that look like?
Crawl, walk, run is always good because we want to make sure you get your feet under you before you go fast on it. If you don't have SAM Pro, you can still manage some of the SaaS items already. Like I said, you can see the portals. You're just not going to be able to integrate all of them directly as easy, but you can still open up that data and you can turn around and say, here are my entitlements. So you can put those entitlements and account for them inside your software asset management side. If you've got the basic ITSM SAM, it's a little bit different, or there's what's called SAM Foundations, which gives you a little more functionality. So it depends on which one you have to which table you put it in. But you can record your licenses or your entitlements, and that way you know what's out there. And then you can also, as part of deploying it, you can account for some of the allocations. You're not going to see it come through as easy or automated, but you'll be able to find it. Now, it's always better to start with your key ones. Microsoft, Adobe, your big dollar spends especially, you can get that in there because you're going to see more value of those. Or if you've got any particular, we see Autodesk as one of them out there under certain licensing. It's expensive and it may be user-based. And then we have to have, how do you bring that usage data in so you can use it also?
Makes sense. And I know that you've talked a lot before, and when you look at the entire ServiceNow platform, SAM is sometimes pointed to as one of the areas that is easiest to build the business case for or show the ROI on, where other aspects of ServiceNow maybe is a little bit squishier. Do you have a sense for the clients we've worked with, the ones you've implemented, the ROI on implementing software asset management in general, not just for SaaS, but SAM Pro? What are you typically seeing out there? Is there a 12-month, 18-month ROI? What can people expect?
I always say you can do it within a year. We're seeing a lot of it's 6 months because they're picking their biggest products that they're going, or their biggest vendors that they're dealing with, and getting it under control. Now, again, there's some surprises out there that said, we're trying to manage this vendor, and they find out that they have a lot more software out there than they knew about. So they have to do true ups for it. But that way it gets them under control. It eliminates the liability, the risk. But for our SAM, I have not seen any that if you put it in and you use it, that you haven't got the payback within, for sure a year, but it's usually within 6 months. But remember, just because you put it in, it doesn't do it by itself. You still have to have your processes that support it, and you actually have to use it. Because I've seen some customers put it in and not use it, and obviously they didn't get an ROI out on that. But I've never seen one that's actually actively using it that didn't pay back, within that year.
Yeah, it's great stuff. And, I talked a little bit earlier about knowledge, and we're all excited about being out there in a couple of weeks. And, what do you see next from software asset management? What are some of the newer things that are happening in the product, as we speak? What do you expect to see? Does AI come into play here a whole lot with asset management? Or any thoughts you have at all about what we can look forward to?
The next big thing that we see in asset management is enterprise asset management. For not only because we're doing it for IT assets, The enterprise is more addressed to non-IT assets. So typically, whether it's medical, the computers that they use, or on the equipment, manufacturing, those type. So different teams manage those. So it's bringing them in. So we're seeing those come in. We're also seeing AI come in or machine learning for it. So we can help normalize what software is out there or what assets, whether it's hardware or software, to get a better picture of it. And then we can also use that we're seeing a lot of customers use it for our virtual agent, and they're asking questions to turn around and said, I need this. What product do you use? And it's like, I need, an easy one. I need a PDF maker. What's the company standard for the PDF maker? And when do they need to pick it and what it is? So it helps them standardize their software or any of their hardware better with it. So we're seeing a lot of those. And then we're also seeing it expand out, like I said, enterprise asset management, but it's going out to inventory management, not just IT related, but inventory is general, whether it's hospital, manufacturing, it's a widget. How do we manage all of these inventories out there for all of the widgets? So we're seeing that come under an asset management look and feel for all of that.
Yeah, no, great stuff. And the one other question I've got from the group, and then I'll turn it over to you to see if you have any other questions you've been asked that you wanted to talk about. But it sounds like ultimately, and the question specifically is, how important is an underlying configuration management database, the CMDB, along with processes around CMDB, to software asset management specifically for SaaS? From a crawl, walk, run perspective, do you have to have CMDB in place, A to Z, with great process behind it, or can you kind of do some things together?
You can do it kind of. Yes, a CMDB is important because I need to know what is out there. That's where but that's not necessarily a SaaS type thing. We're turning around from a software asset management. One of the first things we see is, hi, we want to manage it. How do we get value back? So we'll say, if you use software asset management, you can do the SaaS stuff without all of your CMDB fully up to speed. So we'll see them turn around and go to hardware asset management, ITSM asset management, so they can make sure they're bringing in all their CIs. We can also see the software coming in, so they can see that. But then they will skip and go right to SAM Pro, so then they can use the SaaS functionality to get value faster. And then they're going back to HAM Pro to get more of their hardware management. But like we said, it's easy to get an ROI and value back coming from the SAM side of it. So how do we get them to do it? But we need a CMDB. For SaaS, we don't need a CMDB as tight, but to manage the rest of the software, we do, because I need the hardware information and I need to know what software is installed on it. So that's what we look at for those.
Good stuff. And hey, Doc, if you can advance the slide here, I'll do a quick wrap. And part of that wrap's going to be for the folks on the call here today. If you're going to be at Knowledge, let us know if you want to book a little time with Doc or a team member. When you scan this, you'll get to request a meeting. You can fill that out. We'd love to talk with you. We'd love to meet you there. And for those of you not going to Knowledge, the same is really open to you. When you get that survey that pops up in just about a minute, you can just hit a button and say, hey, yeah, I'd like more information about this. And you will not be inundated in terms of sales and things like that. We'll simply follow up and send you an email and kind of ask if you'd love to have a one-on-one meeting with a Doc Burnham, or if you'd prefer to get some white papers and information like that. We'll make sure you're a CDW customer. We're going to make sure that we're providing all the resources we can to help make the ServiceNow journey for you as effective as possible. Our whole job really as part of this series is helping you get more out of ServiceNow. So any way we can help, we are eager to do that. So Wanted to thank you, Doc, again for sharing all this great stuff with the team. And thanks to everybody that attended today. We'll get a follow-up out. That survey will pop up in a minute, and maybe we'll get a chance to see you in a couple of weeks out in Vegas. Thanks, Doc. Thanks, everybody.